Hi guys, welcome to my crib. I am on sick leave. I had back surgery Tuesday last week, which is about 10 days ago. And this is pretty much the only place where I'm able to sit for a little bit longer time at one go. So here I am in my living room. I wanted to show up with you anyway, regardless of being on sick leave. Because I did not last week. I was totally unable to do that. I was on such strong pain meds that I would not guarantee what would have come out of my mouth had I recorded an episode for last week. This week, I thought about bringing up something a little bit different. So I'm going to talk about self-awareness. I haven't spoken about self-awareness for the longest time. And I think self-awareness is probably one of the most important skill sets that anyone can have when it comes to their career or thriving in their career and thriving also in their personal life and especially in relationships. What I want to address here is that nobody is perfect. We all have our imperfections and flaws. And I think imperfections and flaws are what make us perfect, right? And some of us are better at attracting attention to our strengths, and some of us are worse. And some of us are so focused on our fears and weaknesses that everyone else pays attention to those fears and weaknesses as well. And what works for you doesn't necessarily work for me or the person next to you. And I think I've quoted Gary Vaynerchuk before. He has also said about self-awareness that being at peace with your skill set is such an important part of this, part of you, part of your self-awareness, and all your shortcomings are there for a reason. So hi guys, welcome back to this episode of Building the Modern Employer Brand podcast. My name is Susanna Rantanen, and as one of the world's top employer branding experts and influencers, I invite you to this weekly dose of modernized employer branding education and inspiration. As said, I had to take a pause last week with podcasting because I had back surgery last week and I was unable to podcast. And it has been quite hectic business-wise lately. And because the surgery was set up on such a short notice, and it will probably keep me off work for 3 to 4 weeks, probably 4 weeks, I did not have enough time to prep for new episodes in advance because I had to sort out all my customer cases. Anyway, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, I am so happy that you're here and you're so welcome to join us in exploring what the world of modern employer branding has to offer. And I want to say that this podcast is targeted for those of you who are interested in employer branding, HR marketing, communications, whatever your title is, regardless of whether you actually work in this domain part-time, full-time, or at all. And if you're just looking to start a career and getting some inspiration for a job in this field and in this wonderful domain. So all of you, welcome. My job here is to give you advice, information, share I've been working in this domain for over 20 years. So I've got lots of experience, lots of advice to share, lots of learnings to share. And I also pride myself to being ahead of everything that has to do with building a modern employer brand in this world, as long as my brain works. So I want to keep you updated and help you succeed in whatever you do in employer branding and also in your career in employer branding. So if that resonates with you, make sure you subscribe to this podcast, make it part of your weekly routine, follow and interact with me on my main social media platforms, LinkedIn and Instagram, and also on my newer social media platforms, YouTube and TikTok. But after all this blah, 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 let's get on with what is self-awareness, shall we? So going back to Gary Vee, he said that some people are meant to be B and C players And I'm pissed. That's his words. I'm pissed that the narrative right now is that you have to be number one and have your company. And I'm actually going to link this video from Gary Vee about self-awareness because it's a really good video episode for you to sort of understand also more about self-awareness. Gary Vee is pretty straightforward in his thinking about self-awareness. Self-awareness requires both. You have to understand what you're good at and also what you suck at, and then choosing which path you want to go through. Are you going to follow through or follow this path of the things that you're really great at? Or are you going to hit your head against the wall time after time after time after time and trying to get better in what you suck at? I mean, it could be a good decision, but and it's up for you to decide. But self-awareness is your tool and your compass kind of in helping to decide that. It's kind of like holding this mirror to your inner world, giving you this a front row seat to your thoughts and your feelings and your beliefs and your motivations. It's about recognizing your strengths and your weaknesses, understanding your emotional triggers, and knowing how your actions affect others. Imagine self-awareness as the backstage pass to the concert of your mind, allowing you to tune in your instruments perfectly before you show up for this big show of yours. And in the context of work, self-awareness is, I would say, that secret sauce that can transform a good professional into a great one. And I know that you're going to ask me now, how? Well, first of all, being self-aware will empower you to play to your strengths and work on your areas of improvement. And when you know yourself better, you can adapt, you can communicate more effectively, and you can also lead with empathy, which is, in my opinion, the number one leadership skill in this world right now. So being self-aware is more like being the director of a play where you know not just your own role, but how that entire production comes together so that you can get that standing ovation at the end of the show. So what about self-awareness outside career settings? I think, or I know that self-awareness is equally transformative in our lives outside career settings. As said, I like to think of it as kind of a compass that guides our personal growth journey, helping us to navigate through the highs and lows with grace and resilience. I'm turning 50 next year, so I've had plenty of highs and lows in my life. And when I look back, like the big picture, like the rear view mirror of my life, I understand why I've had lows, what, made me enter those highs, and how I've grown through my life's journey with those experiences from those highs and lows. I'm a very self-aware person. I like to analyze myself and others too a lot. No wonder I was an HR professional once in my career. But nevertheless, I think that when you understand your own emotions, you can create this deeper connection also with others. And that helps you to make your life's journey, I think, richer and more fulfilling. You're not so sensitive to other people's emotions because you can kind of separate your own self from those. When I was younger, I was really easily influenced by the emotions of others, like what was the sort of the vibe of the room. And I would, if let's say a colleague came to the same office room and were in a bad mood, I would easily think that I had done something that made them, put them in that bad mood. So as I've grown, I've been able to, and through self-awareness, I've been able to sort of take myself away from that and evaluate people like separate from myself and not like think everything bad that happens around me is my fault. Because I was that way before. Why is self-awareness such an important asset? I think it's so important because it's kind of a key that unlocks your potential in every aspect of life. It's about knowing your own script by heart, allowing you to improvise brilliantly in this ever-changing play of work and life. And I think that when we're more self-aware, it helps us make better decisions. It helps us improve our relationships, understand other people better, and have this deeper sense of fulfillment, because it's not just about seeing yourself clearly, but it's like seeing others more clearly and also shaping yourself intentionally. And I found this to be a really important key set. I've used it a lot in my journey of growing as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a businesswoman, but also as a wife, as a mother, and as a friend. Now, what about self-awareness and career development? How can self-awareness help you in your professional setting? Well, of course it can. I would say that Americans like to use this word Northern Star. It's like the guiding light in the sky that you follow. I love that kind of a idea, or the kind of a vision of a northern light guiding us in our career journey, guiding us through the inevitable ups and downs of life and career. Because it's not that the entire career of ours will be like 100% butterflies and sunshine, but it helps us to navigate through these, good and bad work experiences towards our ultimate goals of what we want as professionals. So here's a couple of things I wanted to bring up to you about how self-awareness can help be your Northern Star in your career journey. So first of all, it plays to your strengths and helps you to address your weaknesses. I think knowing what your strengths are allows you to also leverage them more effectively in your job and in your career planning and in your career. I mean, imagine pitching to a client or leading a project with a clear understanding of what you're really good at. It's like confidently standing on your own home turf all the time, because you are so confident knowing that I really know what I'm talking about. That's what employer branding is to me. Similarly, when you understand your weaknesses, it's not about self-criticism. It's about self-improvement. It allows us to seek opportunities to grow or find ways to either improve our weaknesses or then compensate those weaknesses with some of our strengths, turning potential pitfalls into more like stepping stones, I would say. Another thing that it helps us is to improve communication and relationships, because self-awareness really helps you to understand how you communicate and how others perceive your words and your actions. Being more self-aware makes you somewhat of an expert editor of your own words, your interactions, ensuring that your messages are super clear, your feedback becomes more constructive, and you become a better listener. And this in turn then fosters stronger work relationships, because I have to say that relationships are everything when it comes to career advancement. It's just the way it is. Another thing is that self-awareness enhances your decision-making, because when you are a very self-aware person or self-aware leader of your own career, you can understand what drives your decision-making process, what weaknesses you have that you need to compensate, and what do you need in order to make those decisions, also including biases and emotional influences. And these, my friend, are super important today in this world that is attempting to become increasingly inclusive. And this switched on clarity enables you to make those choices that are more in line with your life goals, with your aspirations, and your values. Now, when I was a recruitment software entrepreneur and a recruitment consultancy owner, this was my first business, something that was called Hebo. Our business model was based on leading talents and employers together, matching them together based on shared values, behaviors, and mutual aspirations. And during those years, I invested a fair bit of my time into learning more about how to match people and, people based on values, aspirations, and behaviors in ways that brought up not just their past experiences and key learnings, but also their potential and their key growth motivators as job seekers. And that is when I discovered the importance of self-awareness, that self-awareness plays a central role when it comes to identifying who you really are and what your worth is in the labor market. I used to talk a lot about increasing your market value as a job seeker or as a professional during those years and during those times. The entire recruitment business, and I think the way that we seek jobs is wired to look at the history and sum up things that sound the same, make sense, that are logical. But as soon as you ask someone to look outside the box and look at what one has achieved, I call this like stacked in their, what's stacked in their rucksacks? What are the contents of your rucksack and how much are they worth to you? And to whom other are they worth something? And how can you leverage the contents of your rucksack? That's what I call as future potential. And being able to recognize those, clearly message those, and clearly pinpoint the value of what's in your rucksack, I think is really important in your career advancement, in your career journey. And that requires self-awareness. And this is, I think, the area that not just most job seekers ignore because it's kind of abstract. It's hard to pinpoint and hard to be a finger on it. But certainly most recruiters and employers also ignore it, especially younger recruiters who don't know how to deal with it because they just don't have that life experience themselves to figure out, like, if you have this skill, where else can you use it apart from where you used it before. So I think this is an area where so many people and organizations could really benefit from if they tapped in it. Anyway, what I was talking about is that being self-aware is like you have your map and your compass, even when the terrain gets tough, and still how to find your way, how to leverage what you have, what you are, who you are, and what you're made of for the greater good and for your own benefit. So that's what I think about it. I think self-awareness fuels also your professional growth. I think that self-aware individuals are more adept at learning from experiences because they can critically reflect on their actions and their outcomes and their behavior. And being able to reflect, I think, turns even the smallest task or interaction into a learning opportunity because it helps you to propel you forward in your career. It's about being both the student and the teacher in this classroom of your professional life. And this I find super important because how the world has changed for the better part of the last 2 decades means that we often have to take matters in our own hands because we might just know the most about it. I mean, I've been working in this domain for long enough to have seen how the entire a digital talent was born and has grown and developed, and especially when I was still working as a recruitment consultant, it was fun to talk to employers about their hiring needs. When they needed people, they kind of went in, oh, we need this person who has 10 years of such and such, but the thing hasn't by the time that thing hadn't even existed for 10 years. So there were such new things coming to the market that even employers and recruiters got completely confused about how much experience can you really ask for something that hasn't really existed even for a long time. So when you're self-aware, you kind of understand what's possible and what's not possible. And I find that self-aware people also like to keep themselves educated and kind of stay ahead the curve, if you like, or this way, because the video is there. And because they are not able to get this information from widely from others, they have to do the work, kind of take the matters in their own hands and do the work and make sure that they build up their knowledge in something that they feel very strong about and that feels like their own comfortable home turf that they're really good at. That's their strength. So I think that's one area where being self-aware helps you to grow professionally. Another thing is being self-aware helps to build your leadership skills. Leadership demands a deep understanding of oneself and one's impact on others. Self-awareness allows you to lead with empathy, which I think is the number one skill of leadership skill in this decade. Inspire also with authenticity and manage others with understanding. It's like, when you are more self-aware, you're also more aware of others, and that helps you to harmonize the individual talents in your own team into kind of like an orchestra of success. And I find that self-aware people are more aware of their surroundings. They're more empathetic towards others and also more capable of recognizing strengths and weaknesses in others, like their team members, which makes, I think, great leadership. Self-aware people, I think, are more able to also to adapt to change. And this is really a crucial skill in today's fast-paced world. And I'm sure you can agree with that. Self-awareness equips you with this emotional flexibility that you can handle change and uncertainty because you know what your strengths are and you can really lean onto those strengths in those times of uncertainty. It's about recognizing when it's time to hold your ground and when it's time to pivot, ensuring that you remain relevant and resilient no matter what the job market throws your way. This is something that as a self-aware person, I've really used as my strength. I've been able to stay relevant and resilient, pivot new things and change as the domain has changed because the world, ever since I became an entrepreneur, I think the fastest change in the history of humankind has taken place during the time that I have been an entrepreneur. Also, self-awareness attracts opportunities because self-aware people really radiate this authenticity and confidence. And those qualities are really magnetic in professional world and drawing these opportunities towards you because people want to work with someone who knows who they are and where they want to go. It's about being that someone to others that illuminates their paths and lights the way for others too, sets the example, somebody that I can really enjoy watching when they move forward and I can follow them and I can, they are my example and my sort of mentor or my source of inspiration. That is the radiation of self-awareness. And through that, you get lots more business and professional growth opportunities and professional opportunities too. That I can 100% really highlight and put my signature on it because that's what has happened to me. When you know your script, you understand your role, you're performing with it, you're performing it with conviction on this stage of your personal life. That is really inspiring to others, and that gives you more opportunities. And that's what self-awareness really gives you. Before we go, I want to talk about why self-awareness might be your most important skill for success in a workplace. And I think that the sort of the overall general response to that is because the world is full of opportunities. Last time when I wrote about self-awareness was like years ago, and I then linked this video about Mark Cuban from the Lion's Den was talking about self-awareness. It's not very long. It's less than a minute, like maybe 30, 40 seconds long. He pinpoints that you've got to know what you're good at, what you're marginal at, and what you sucked at. And I've used terms like recognizing and leveraging one's potential and identifying one's own skills and that market value. And each of us defines success in the workplace in our own ways, and that is our right. Success to me professionally can mean something completely different than it means to you or, somebody else out there. And that's okay. your success doesn't have to be defined by somebody else's definition of success. So being self-aware gives you this, that I know what success is to me. This is my path, my journey. That's my goal. And you can think about success in your own terms, but these are my terms. I think seeing opportunities requires understanding how we are wired. And self-awareness means that you know your own limits and you know your own strengths. I know where I am. I know where I can excel. I know where I have room for development, provided that the motivational factors are in place. And above all, I know my weaknesses. What I don't know or how I can act won't change. So it's better to focus on what I'm really good at, right? So I once developed a skills profiling form for Hebo. This was my first startup in 2010. And that required professionals to bundle their skills and expertise and experiences thematically. Users loved it. They told me how often, how they often wrote the typical job applications kind of like mechanically without much thinking about what their CVs really message to the reader. And when I gave them this tool to identify their own skills, that led them to consider their skills, achievements, and interests in a completely different way what they typically did when they started to look for a new job. And numerous spontaneous feedbacks let us know at the time that people don't know how how they're wired. And this framework that I developed on this Hebo, this was a software at the time, it generated numerous insights for those users. Many told us that they realized that they were actually applying for completely wrong types of jobs for themselves. And they were able to make a conscious change in their job seeking patterns and land much better fitting jobs, some even dream jobs they mentioned. So self-awareness helps us see and choose those right bets, see sort of beyond our patterns of behavior and recognize whether this pattern that I've been sort of copying for the longest time, is this the right pattern for me? Am I doing things wrong that are hurting my abilities to get that success that I'm looking for, that I'm after? And if I change this pattern, is that success going to be more realistic for me? So I think that being self-aware helps us see and choose these right paths for ourselves. And having been in the HR industry for long enough, like half of my career, I was heavily involved in recruitment. And my experience from that time is that there's a real lack of skills, that the real lack of skills is rarely the reason for a failed recruitment. And it's much more common to fail in landing your next job or, succeed in talent acquisition is because of lack of self-awareness. And imagine that I'm capable of something that sounds interesting, but I might not consider the factors that actually prevent me from succeeding in it. And it's not just the job description, but it's also the sort of the exteriors of the job. So where I'm supposed to do this job, a completely identical job description on paper can really turn into a different role based on where I'm supposed to be doing it. So even though the job description, the job post, the actual job post is likely to be a very different experience, because your experience in the job is so much influenced by the organization who hires, their culture, the size of the company, how many people they employ, where they're located, who your supervisor is, what's the management, the leadership culture like, the values, the customers, the company's financial situation, their strategy, their resources, and your own real interests, those interests that self-aware people can recognize. And when we're faced with choices, we tend to choose the tasks that we find the most meaningful at the time. What if the true emphasis of that job description on paper is completely wrong for us? What if we interpret that the emphasis of this job is something that is very meaningful for us, but when we actually land the job, we realize that, well, that's maybe like a 5% of this job that I wanted to do like 100% of this job. So what always interested me about hiring, and still when I hire people from our own business, is the last section in the job application, which is often titled hobbies and other interests. This section, I think, reveals us the most, because it reveals us, or can reveal us, how this job applicant is actually wired. And unfortunately, this incredible opportunity is regularly overlooked by job seekers and by recruiters, because the other one doesn't reveal anything about their hobbies and interests, and the other party doesn't know how to read, how to analyze, or how to talk about those hobbies and interests in more detail. So what we voluntarily spend time on our free time gives a lot of clues on how we are wired and what's really important to us. And the hobbies and interests section usually lists hobbies that sound like media sexy to us, regardless of whether we have touched that tennis racket we mentioned over the past 10 years. So try focusing on this section the next time you write a job application for yourself. Think about how you spend your free time. What really matters to you? What takes up the lion's share of your free time? And then consider why you spend the most of your time on that. What is it about this activity that fascinates you? Write it all down. List what you have achieved and what is the value of your time spent to yourself or somebody else. This way, you're already on this path to self-awareness. And I know that us middle-aged folks blame everything on the busy years. And if your free time goes into chauffeuring kids around and caring for the home, you can still identify elements in your everyday life where you excel and where you don't, what you truly enjoy and why. Why is key here, and what really drives you nuts, and why, again, is key here. So discover. Becoming more self-aware is really about discovering those whys within you. And I think parents who build careers and shuffle everything at home and at work at the same time are not just nearly burnt out, but they are the people who get my most admiration in work life. They're likely to be massively excellent in time management, have exceptional organizational approach and management skills, are probably also quite innovative and rich in ideas, probably very flexible and able to adjust to changing situations. And this all matters. This all is value in your professional rucksack, like so many other things, such as your networks and your connections. So don't ignore this full picture of what you are made of and how it all reflects in what you're capable of, or what you're marginal at, or what you simply suck at and never want to do again. I have plenty of those that I never want to do again. And as an entrepreneur, I make sure that I have to. That's what being self-aware really is. The more self-aware you are, the more empowered you become. And that, my friend, is the key that unlocks the door to more aspirational and authentic self and life. You know what? Making this episode brought back all those memories and conversations I had with so many job seekers over 10 years ago during those HEBO years. And I might just want to bring this side up and see how I could help you develop your self-awareness. So hit me with a DM on LinkedIn, Instagram, or email me directly at Susanna, SUSANNA, at Emine, EMINE.fi. If this is something that interests you, I might be able to think about like a workshop online or something like that for a group of interested individuals wanting to discover the ins and outs of their professional rucksack and how to make that hobbies and interest section rise in value. How does that sound for you? That was totally spontaneous, by the way, but an idea that hit me hard in my heart. And if there is enough interest, people, it would make sense for me to create something good and worthy for you and me, right? That's all for this week, my dear audience. Don't forget to subscribe to Building a Modern Employer Brand podcast on your favorite podcast app or here on YouTube. And while you are there, why don't you rate this podcast too? That would be really wonderful. And as always, just to mention and remind you, the show notes article with any links that I've mentioned on this episode, any possible additional resources can be found on this podcast's very own website, www.modernemployerbrand.com/podcast. This is episode 179. All right. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week again. Same place, same time. Moi moi.